Hey, this is Jan. I am the CEO and founder of Commercial Real Estate, and today we are going to be talking about building permits, certificate of occupancies, all of these things that oftentimes aren't at the forefront of making a decision when it comes to buying or leasing a property. So you wouldn't buy a business without looking at the books of that business and understanding what kind of income it's producing and what kind of expenses that business has. So you shouldn't purchase or lease a property without understanding what kind of permits have been pulled and completed on that property, as well as what kind of certificate of occupancy that property has had in the past, and whether that certificate of occupancy will continue to be allowed at that property. Let's go ahead and get into the video. So a certificate of occupancy is a document that confirms how the space can be used. A certificate of occupancy allows us to use the space for a particular use, whether that's storage or distribution, or it gets a little further than that. But it actually tells us what the space can be used for. And in many cities, you have a history of the different kinds of certificate of occupancies that have been pulled on a property. So if you live in a place like, let's say, Los Angeles, and I'm sure there are many other cities that have this, but here, you're able to go into public records and see what the previous certificate of occupancies on properties have been. So if you're buying a building and you're going to purchase that property, you want to make sure that your use will be able to receive a certificate of occupancy on the building. Or you could be somebody who is just taking over the same use that already is on the property. So you want to make sure that your use is permitted through the certificate of occupancy. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about are building permits. Building permits that tell a story. Now, if you're feeling this video, if this is resonating with you and you like the information and knowledge, go ahead, like and subscribe. That tells us we're doing something correctly and for us to continue to produce these kind of videos. All right, let me get back into it. So permits tell the property history and story. You're able to pull up a permit, once again, using public records in major cities that tell you this was completed. This work was done, and it was done with the standards that the city has used. It was done through engineering standards that have been updated, through standards where an inspector comes and looks at the way that the work was done. It also tells you when the last time something was actually changed. Now, when you have permits, they let you know what you can expect when it comes to the life of a building system. So for instance, if you had your plumbing changed, let's say 40 years ago, that's the last time you can find a permit, it's safe to assume that plumbing hasn't been changed for that long. Now, some people do things without permits, or permits they say take a long time, and therefore they cut corners and essentially break the rules by not having permits on their work. Obviously, we don't recommend doing that at all, but when you're a tenant or you're a buyer and you're going to acquire a new building, you need to understand what work has already been done so you can forecast your budget into the future of what work can possibly be assumed to be needed. So these are things that are not at the forefront. We talked about that in the beginning. This is not at the forefront of a transaction. So when you're evaluating a space, you need to ask these questions. What's the current certificate of occupancy on the property? Are there any conditional use permits on the property? Do you have any violations on this property or unfinished permits on the site today? Ask those questions. Ask the broker. Ask the owner and see how they respond to them. And it also shows that you're serious, that you have a little bit more depth and sophistication, that you aren't overly zealous to commit to the site, and that you can holistically look at a property through a wider lens. But once again, don't stop there. Don't stop with just asking someone. Go ahead and systematically pull those records from your government entity, from your city, from your building department, and understand how it all fits together, because you can't just rely on what someone else is telling you. I have a client who had an attorney tell them that their zoning on their building would have allowed them for a particular use, and then when they came to get a specific license on that building, they found out that it would not work. And now they were in a very bad and frustrating situation. And so you need to understand what you're doing so you can have that confidence in your process and in your execution. And when you understand this process, then you can holistically acquire space. So you can't just rely on your architect. You can't just rely on your land use person. You can't just rely on your attorney. Take this information that we're distilling right now and let it soak in and actually figure out how you're going to reach out to your government entities, your permits, your Department of Building and Safety, and get that information. It's information that is going to serve you throughout the life of the property. And when you have all of this information, and let's say now you transition from being a buyer or tenant to landlord or seller, and you are now looking to transact on a property, well, you can go into that situation with a lot more clarity for your tenant or your buyer, and you can pass that information along. So once again, this video is all about getting clarity on what permits have been pulled on the property, getting clarity on what your current certificate of occupancy is, and going beyond what you see at the forefront of the property and making sure that you're doing your due diligence with depth, integrity, structure, and putting it all together so that you can transact holistically. If you vibe with this and you want to transact holistically, go ahead and reach out to us. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to explore the possibility of working together. Have a great day, and we appreciate you watching.